If your deputy chief has anything, Sean?
I do not, but I send regards from the group. I'm sure they are hoping you have a good meeting with Deputy Chief Jamie Coots from Alberta.
All right, moving right along. Isabel, can you please introduce our guest speaker for tonight?
Thank you. We'll do so. So welcome everyone, and a special welcome to Chief Jamie Coots, who is here with us visiting from Alberta. We thank him for joining us. Jamie is the quintessential fire chief, joining fire department at 18 years of age, climbing the ranks before moving into provincial responsibilities, including training, moving home to become the chief of Slave Lake Fire. Along the way, he has attended some of the largest emergencies and disasters that have taken place across Canada, those being in the province of Alberta, including wildfires and floods. Jamie's family is involved in the fire service with his wife in emergency management, his son a lieutenant, as well as his daughter studying emergency management, and I believe a grandchild maybe in the future will become a firefighter. We welcome him all the way from Chestermere, Alberta, and you will have seen him on both television and have heard his podcasts. So please, everyone, welcome Jamie.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me. Nice to see so many of your faces there, a few familiar ones, but definitely not everybody. So I signed up for this like, I don't know, a month and a half ago. I don't even really know what we're supposed to talk about tonight. Crispin, do you remember?
We said that we would talk about friendship, fire during disasters, and some things like that. Some lessons learned in your time in the fire service.
Oh, wow. So this is just one of those ones where I just get to talk about kind of whatever I want then. I don't have any friends, so that'll be quick and easy. That's done already. We can move on from there. So yeah, so I guess this is just, this is my fault because I'm friends with Carl. And so you guys were looking for some topics and reached out, right? So I think that, when we talk about being in the right place at the right time or the wrong place at the right time, that happened to me a lot in my career. And so I think the 2011 wildfire that burned down 35% of our town would definitely be a topic I could talk about. Then I got to sit through the floods of 2013, which was kind of all around Calgary and southern Alberta, and then back up to Fort Mac for 2016, high level 2019. I mean, the list goes on and on. I got to be kind of the master of disaster for a little while, which was, it's kind of a fun thing, not something that you can say to everybody, right? You're a group of firefighters, you get it, right? Something's on fire, we want to be there. And so, luckily I got to be there or got called to be there. And then I guess kind of by accident, you just slowly gain experience and knowledge and get to be the go-to person that people call up when there's something bad going on. Not by design, certainly not what I signed up for or thought that I would be good at in my life. And then, through all of that, I guess the TV show, which was really screwed up because I got a face for radio, obviously, not TV, but got to do that kind of stuff. And remember, if you've seen the show, TV is fake. I'm actually a super nice guy. You could ask my friends, but I don't have any. So got to do that. And then just lately got to start doing a podcast. So if you've heard that or not, Growing Up Fire. And that's simply about probably every single person that's on here tonight. It's about all of us. It's really just kind of meeting people that I've met in my career and through my life in the fire world to talk about, whatever. Things from the past, things from the present, things that are, what things look like in the future. I guess one of my favorites probably was with the Hutter 8 guys from Acres Emergency Vehicles, as they talked about future technologies and kind of breaking down the stereotypes of, their beliefs and their way of living and how they got into building fire trucks and what those would look like in the future. So a few things, I guess, about me. I just moved to Chestermere after I don't know, took a couple of years off, I guess, to work as a consultant on a fire service evaluation project. Got that going, did about 17 fire departments in a year and a half, and then kind of started to long for that operational readiness, that operational teamwork that we all crave, right? Going on the calls, being with your buddies, getting through all of this stuff together. And so back to that, not that it wasn't fun working by myself, but that guy's a bit of a jerk. So, it was more fun to be with a team and to move through like that. So for me, I think that for any of you that heard me talk before, any of you that know really anything about me, I would say that my life is about 4 things: ego, turf, time, and money. And specifically for those 4 things is breaking down all of the problems that those cause in the fire service. So we all know it. Maybe a few of us in this particular call are it, right? There's some big egos out there. I think that I would tell you that I was definitely one of them prior to 2011. I think my career was going good. We were kicking butt. I was a pretty young chief of a pretty big department. And, then a wildfire comes, wipes out 35% of your town. And I can tell you that is the biggest ego crushing, soul crushing thing that ever happened to me in my life. I have never walked another day on this planet after that, thinking that there's not something I could learn or do better or different. Obviously wish I could have some time back there. And then to just move that forward, right? And it's kind of 2 things. You can take a lesson. We all have heard of lessons learned, right? And so to me, there's 2 things. There's lessons learned and lessons observed. Sadly, a lot of the lessons stay in the observed column. So a lesson observed to me means we made no change. We didn't actually learn from it. We didn't change a policy, program, procedure. We didn't change training, apparatus. We didn't change a mindset. So we observed the problem and then just let her go. Then there's the lesson learned, which actually means we changed something, did something different, tried to change our programs or whatever to fix that moving forward. And so I could tell you from all of those events I talked about and lots of others that I try my hardest every day to move forward and with lessons learned. So not observed, we don't just talk about them and leave them. We learn them. We have the hard discussions. We learn the hard truths and we get through it. Right. And so I think that when I talk about leadership and friendship, right, I'm lucky. I got to travel this entire country. I got to go and talk at your big fire chief convention, the Ontario Fire Chiefs Convention, where the boss from Toronto fell asleep during my talk. So I won't hold it against you if any of you fall asleep, because it happens, right? So, got to go over to the East Coast, got to go to the West Coast, got to go up to the North many times to Whitehorse and talk to the Yukon folks. And really what I learned through all of that, right? So I think that my quest through all of this friendship and learning has been to visit 500 fire halls by the end of 2021. And I've been to 364 now. I'm not going to make it to 500. I'm a realist, right? COVID has slowed me down. Getting a new job slowed me down. But what I really learned from visiting all those fire halls and being through all of these events and getting to be, on TV and having a podcast and interacting with, I'd say hundreds of people for sure every week on social media, is that we're all a lot the same, right? It's firefighters. We got a good heart. We got a big heart. We're hard charging. We know a lot of stuff about firefighting. We're here to help the public, right? And I think that you have to have a bit of swagger in this job. I think it would be impossible for us to not have a bit of ego, a bit of swagger. It's just too dangerous, too important, a little too crazy some days. But it's all about how do we take care of that? How do we watch after that? And I often tell the story, like I've met 50 people across this country that invented playing volleyball and SCBA as a means of testing your SCBA and cardio. You know, I met 200 people across this country that invented how we wind our hoses up with drills or hand cranks or, right? And that's just the firefighter way. All of those people really honestly think they invented that. They think that they were the first ones to think of it and to have it. And, you know, by traveling, I got to see that there's a lot more things that we could learn from each other than trying to compete against each other or trying to pretend that, you know, we invented it all or we thought it all up. You know, I work now with a full-time fire department, which is first for me. And I still find myself reaching out. I'm reaching out to volunteer departments. I'm reaching out to paid on-call departments full-time because I don't want to reinvent anything, honestly. I would rather call up some friends or call up their friends and see if we could borrow some information or move this thing forward, right? Crispin, who's gonna, like, if there's questions that pop up here or people want to stop and ask me something, are you taking care of that? How are we figuring that out?
Yeah, we'll let you speak. If something comes up in the chat, I'll ask, and then we'll maybe open it at the end for questions.
Okay, if you just let me speak, we're guaranteed at least one sleeper. I don't know who it's going to be. Sean, maybe you pay attention. Really is to just, yeah, I could just talk about this all day, and I feel like it's boring for some people. So feel free to shut your video off and go watch the game or something if you have to. So for me, with the eval tool, the evaluation tool we worked on, it was all part of that. It was developed based on the idea that there's so many of us that have to do this part-time off the corner of our desk. And really, you don't know what you don't know. And that's just a true fact. It's something we've all learned. It's something that we all know. And we wanted to develop something where we could look at all the different aspects of kind of what we've learned as we go into these big events, right? And a big event, you know, you have to remember, like, you don't have to have 35% of your town to burn down for it to be a big event. It could be multiple house fires at the same time. It could be flooding. It could be a tornado. It could be, you know, a bad summer storm, a bad winter storm. You know, all of those things to me, all those natural disaster type things are big events, right? So it's not, nobody's trying to measure here. It's all is what it is, right? But it's trying to capture all of that stuff and do the best job you can with the time allotted, with the money that you have, right? So all of those grinds, if we go back to that ego, turf, time, and money, how do we make sure that we find out what those things are, those little grinds in day-to-day life or those big problems that pop up, and relate them back to one of those four things, right? So how do we overcome ego problems? How do we overcome turf problems? Right. So I'm super proud to be talking to you today because this group is just a great example of how to help start to overcome any ego or turf problems you could run into. Right. How do we work together? How do we figure out who's going to do what and where? And you know, right at the start, you're talking about all the different stations that are part of this in your area. And so super proud to be here, super proud of the work you guys are doing and to be talking to you. But then also to break down money problems, right? And so I think that each one of you would say that there's probably some money problems. We can't get enough from council, or we do a lot of fundraising, and that's a plague, you know, on the firefighters to have to go out, or the community to have to give more than they already are. And then just simply that time factor. Right. So how much time do I have to put to everything? Maybe there's the odd full-time person on here. Maybe there isn't. I'm not sure. Paid on call, right? However you run your service, you know, how do we get enough time to figure it all out? And so I often say to people that we're kind of like this huge checklist group. If you gave us a checklist and said, this is 100% how you run a fire department, all you got to do is check all the boxes and do all the things. Absolutely every single one of us would completely crush being a fire department, right? Because it's who we are, it's how we are, it's how we do this. The problem is nobody gives us those. So there's good attempts. There's always good attempts, right? It could be from your association. It could be from the Office of the Fire Commissioner. You know, it could be from companies. It could be from consultants. But at the end of the day, nobody can build your fire service the way that you can build your fire service. Nobody can evaluate your fire service the way that you can evaluate your fire service, because we all run it so differently. And I would say, like, to me, visiting as many as I have and talking to so many in depth about their fire service is like, here in Alberta, we have 450 fire departments. We probably run those 600 different ways. We can't even decide on our own fire department sometimes how to run them and how to make a go of it and how to figure this all out. And so, that time and money piece is huge. Those are big concerns, and those are big problems that we just can't get over, right? Which piece of equipment are we going to buy? Is it because we can only afford this one, or is it because we want this one? Do we fundraise for that? Do we go to council and beat it out of them? How do we get the money to do what we're going to do? How do we get the time to do what we're going to do? And that has gone up. I see a couple people that are getting long in the tooth like me, right? And we can all remember a time when, like my first night, just joined up, got a pager. The next night, I went to a call. A guy died, left his 2 kids, had to drive the ambulance while they were sitting in the seat with me, right? And so that's crazy. Like, how we ever got away with that, how that was ever okay or all right, is beyond me. And yet I go, month after month and sit down, do these council workshops, and we talk about the same thing. Why can't we just get a water truck? Why do we have to have a fire truck? Right? Why can't we buy a 25-year-old truck and make that work? Why does our gear have to be replaced when it's 10 years old? Right? We don't understand. It still looks like new. We only go to 30 calls a year or 100 calls a year. Doesn't make any sense. And there's just so many things that councils don't understand. Right? So we're trying to get money from people to do a job that they don't understand. We're trying to get more time, whether it's more paid on call people, more full-time people, more whatever, to help us do this job. And they don't understand why we need that, right? And then in true fire department fashion, we stop being firefighters and we retire. And some of us think that the greatest job that we can do after that is to join council. Any of you guys have those? Maybe some of you are those, right? And so you get a firefighter on council and maybe it's good. Maybe it really helps you out. It helps them learn about what's going on. Or maybe it's the opposite and it really hurts everything. And we're talking about something that happened 30 years ago or 40 years ago, or how we do it on the farm instead of how we do it in the fire service. And then we got to manage that. Right. And so that kind of becomes one of those turf things where someone's like, oh, I want it to be the old way, the way that it used to be. Right. I don't care if the truck's 40 years old. If it still pumps, it still pumps. Yet we know that new technologies change every single day for an apparatus. Right. And so you could have the best, coolest, most awesome truck anyone ever saw that's 20 years old. And a lot of the technology is laughable compared to today's safety standards, compared to today's pumping capacity, compared to the water that it can haul or pump and roll or any of those types of things. And so it doesn't matter if you're, the biggest fire department, Toronto, Ottawa, Calgary, Edmonton, or if you're the smallest fire department. I believe that our firefighters, firefighter safety is paramount. And so you should have access to those technologies. You should have access to, right? Can't have it all. But if we switch out our trucks at an appropriate time, if we switch out our gear at the right time, if we upgrade our equipment when it's due in time, we're trying to keep up with firefighter safety. We're trying to keep up with those technologies. And so I will tell you that in 2011, our big plan was to surround the city, hit every third hydrant and pump water into the bush. And for some reason, we thought that will absolutely stop the fire. That worked for about 5 seconds. The fire blew over top of us a couple blocks. And we spent the next 14 hours, 15 hours trying to just catch up and get back to zero. Right? So there's a thing where that was our plan for 50 years. We trained on that plan for 50 years. We absolutely knew for a fact that that would work for 50 years. And in 5 seconds, it was wrong. We'd wasted our time, we'd wasted our efforts, we'd wasted our planning, and it blew right past us like it was nothing. And I think these are those big events that happen that straighten our thinking out, right? And so in Alberta, you would think, hey, those guys went through that. We spent $3 billion fixing that problem. And we supposedly learned a bunch of things. And then we went up to Fort McMurray, 2016. And I can tell you, I was standing right on Beacon Hill Drive, and I'd heard all the things, and I'd had my say at the EOC. And I actually looked at the two guys, my son and another guy, Patrick McConnell, that came with me, and I said, the same thing is going to happen. This fire is going to burn this city down, and we're going to be standing right here when it happens, because nobody changed, nobody listened to us. There's still too much ego, there's still too much turf, right? There's still not enough money, and they wasted all the time they had to get ahead of this. And sure enough, like it wasn't an hour later, we're fighting 20 house fires on Beacon Hill Drive while we're evacuating people a block away, trying to keep them from burning to death in these house fires. Right? Not fun, not cool, not the way that it's supposed to be, but it's reality, right? I could tell you today in this province, we still have some of the exact same problems that we started with 10 years ago. We put 3 different groups in charge of changing it. 3 different groups failed. We picked another group, put them in charge of it. We'll see how it goes. But at the end of the day, if fail forward is a real thing, we're not getting it done here in Alberta, right? So, there's so many lessons in all of that. You would think that if you stand on a street corner and watch 35 houses burn down around you, and you watch what happens to the staff and to the public and to the fire department that you love, that you would make sure that never, ever, ever happens again. But the reality is we have those 4 battles: ego, turf, time, and money, that constantly pop up, that constantly are a problem. And I would say that one of the biggest learnings I have from those big fires is that you can never quit fighting those battles. Those 4 things will keep rearing their ugly head, and you have to keep having those battles. You have to keep having those tough discussions, those talks that no one wants to have, right? Whether it's, hey, firefighter, how come you never come to practice, but you come to calls? You're putting us at risk. Hey, how come you keep borrowing stuff from the fire hall and not bringing it back, or it's not here when we need it, or hey, how come this fire truck only has a quarter tank of fuel and we're trying to run these big calls and you guys are not helping us, right? And so I think these are all probably talks that you've all had or been involved with, and they're those tough discussions, right? I could just guess that probably a bunch of you only get in front of your councils when it's time to ask for money, or a truck, or a fire hall, or a whatever, right? And so there's another one of our problems. If time is one of the big 4, right, and money is one of the big 4, then make the time to go to council more often and have talks about your fire service, and don't just make it about money. It's a huge failing in the fire service, right? And I could tell that a bunch of you have been there before, and you've gone into council, and you've gone into the body that takes care of you, and you're going to ask for a truck. You're going to ask for new rescue tools. You're going to ask for new bunker gear. And the eyes start rolling, and the council's like, oh, great, the fire department's here, got their hand out, they want more money. And we go there hat in hand, like we're going to beg and try and convince them that we're good enough people. You should support us. We're right. Don't get me wrong. Some of you probably have great support, and this isn't about you, right? Just be thankful and move on. For the rest of us, we've been there and we've had to beg, right? And it's not how it is. You go to a business and say, hey, can you give us money to help support the fire department? And it just gets so tough all the time to be talking about money and to be right. And then you get these events. So 2011, if they would have given me $5 million 2 years before and said, make sure that this town can never burn down from wildfire, I don't think it would have changed the outcome. We would have had a lot more shiny equipment. We would have had a lot more hose, but I would have missed a lot of the key factors that caused this to happen. I wouldn't have known that the power was going to go out, even though we're a 3-feed community. I wouldn't have known that the wind was going to get to 127 kilometers an hour and blow it right over top of us. I wouldn't have used the money to think of those things to get ahead of that. Right. Fort McMurray, same thing. They had all the time in the world. It started as a small fire 2 days before. But I'm not blaming them. I mean, they didn't know the wind was going to pick up. They didn't know the wind was going to shift 180 degrees. They didn't know what they didn't know. And to be fair to them, they weren't in a position to listen to it. They weren't ready to have that conversation or to move on and to learn that, right? I mean, they certainly are now, but $9 billion later, what goes on there, right? And so just so many times and so many things, you get there and you see that it's chaos, right? They sent us to High River. So this is a community, I would say about 80% of the community flooded, 14,000 people, 100% evacuated, 80% people affected by flooding. And province sends us down there, say, hey, you guys, just go to the fire hall. A bunch of firefighters' houses are flooded. Just go in there and help them out. You guys take over for them. And so we show up at the fire hall the first day and say, hey, the province sent us here to help you guys out. We're going to take over. You want to know what the fire chief said? Not allowed to say that on here, right? And so he didn't know we were coming. He didn't, it's one of those pieces, right? Like, this is my hometown. My house is flooded. We're taking care of this stuff. You guys get out of here. We don't need you. And we spent 2 days mopping the floors and taking care of the toilets and driving around, touring around and kind of picking up their food and whatever we could do to help them out until we could build some trust. Right? Until we could have a good talk with them and say, hey, we've been where you are. We get it, right? But this is that TSN turning point. Do I take a step forward and grab your hand and say, thanks for the help? Or do I put up my ego and turf wall and say, I don't need your help. Get out of here. When clearly we do, right? And so to me, there's just so many lessons in all of this that you can learn about mutual aid, working together, about why we do this job and who it's for. It's not for us. It's not about us, right? It's about everybody else. But sadly, there's always those pieces where we don't learn from it and we don't move forward and our ego is too big. And those kinds of things are just an incredible problem. I'll say that there's the 4 best weeks of my work life were 2 weeks in Slave Lake and 2 weeks in Fort McMurray, when we were just out there doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason with the right people. We're just out there gunslinging it, 1,000 firefighters in hundreds of fire trucks from, 40, 50 different outfits. And your job is just put out as much fire as you can and be safe and get it done, right? So we weren't getting fed properly. We're not getting enough sleep. We're short on equipment. But it was like the greatest firefighting moments of my career because everybody had a common goal. There was no turf. There was no ego, really. I mean, it's all shattered by then. I would say, to be fair, money wasn't a problem. We could order whatever we wanted. We could do whatever we wanted. And then, I mean, time's against you, but that's something you can't do anything about in this particular case. And so we just got to be out there doing it, right? And we learned a crazy amount of things. We tried a crazy amount of things. All those things you always said, man, if I could redo that house fire, what would I do different and see if it made a difference? Well, I'm not scared to tell you, we did that hundreds of times, right? We're out there working on a street in Fort McMurray where there's a D9N cat knocking down houses and an excavator knocking down houses, and an ARF truck drives by you, and then 4 or 5 fire trucks. And on that street, there's 6 ladder trucks all spraying in different ways. And it was kind of like the greatest firefighter conference you could ever go to in your entire life. It's like, oh, look at that truck, look at that truck, look at that truck. An ARF truck pulls up in the middle of the city and says, hey, I need your hydrant. Yeah, go ahead, buddy. What? I don't care. It's all high five. You got an ARF truck. I'm just rolling this little fire truck. So You know, all of those cool pieces where you're just like, this is incredible. Like, you know, we watched those things, you know, rip down houses, and that had to be our decision to say, rip down this house, rip down that house, and get everybody, you know, on the same page. Where, you know, I'll often say to this, heavy equipment operators, what's the hardest two things to get heavy equipment operators to do in a fire? One is to start knocking down houses, and the second one is to stop. Right? It's their big tonkatory dream to be out there, and you have to detach yourself from this is someone's house and put yourself in this is just another kind of tree. This is a house tree, just like a spruce tree or a pine tree or birch tree. To be able to get to the end of those processes. And then you go back into those neighborhoods, and you can just imagine, like, you know, imagine whole blocks of your town completely wiped off the face of the earth. Like, no firefighting effort whatsoever. There's a stove, the metal stove, the metal washer, dryer, maybe some pieces of the furnace if it didn't melt away. And a lot of these fires, like, they're burning at 1200 degrees Fahrenheit and hotter, untouched by any firefighting effort. Right. And in some cases, we piled them up on top of the basement and just really got them going. Right. So just the level of fire and the amount of fires, like, if I never had to go to a house fire again, you know, my career high is, I don't know what, 1,500 houses. You know, so I've seen lightweight construction burn. I've seen 4-story apartments burn to the ground. In Slave Lake, 7 of them took about 30 minutes apiece to burn right down to the concrete. Right. And so it's these really sad lessons and these really crazy videos, which, Crispin, I'll send you some of those and you can ship it out to the team so they can have a look later on. Some of those pictures and videos and things like that. Right. It's not a secret what happened there. We don't try to hide it. It's we had to go there and fight fire and do the best we could do with what we had, which in this case was bulldozers and track hose, right? But again, I really like to say that the Slave Lake was the one that brought us all together, right? Almost 50 different agencies from across the entire province of Alberta. 1,100 firefighters was our daytime high, biggest daytime high. So that's in a place where the regional firefighter count is 100 at 4 stations. And now we're doing 1,100, right? There's volunteer, full-time, paid on call, right? Career, everybody's there. And a lot of those egos, a lot of that craziness just honestly went away. My best full-time story has to be the Edmonton and Calgary guys. We're in Slave Lake, and we kind of got through the fire, and then it was like, okay, we have to put up this security fencing. And so it was slated in the EOC as a 48-hour job. So 4 shifts of firefighters to put up this 5 kilometers of security fencing. And the Edmonton and Calgary guys did that in one night, 1 12-hour night shift. And it was simply due to the way firefighters are, right? It started off, the Edmonton guys were going, they kind of pulled ahead of the Calgary guys. So the Calgary guys got some lights and some more tools and kind of started to pull ahead of the Edmonton guys. And before long, it kind of got bad, and we were almost going to stop it as some of the IC team. And then we're like, no, just let's let this play out and watch this. And they would have like spies, right? So they would shoot across and see how they were doing it so fast, right? Like, oh, they're laying out fence. We'll go back and we'll lay out fence. And then they would start to catch up, and the other guys would send spies across. It was kind of like watching a world war, right? And this fence is going up like at a mad pace. And they're asking us, hey, can you bump the lights ahead? Can you get more fencing? Can you get us more wire? Can you get us more cutters? And, you know, we're back at HQ going, what is going on over here? Like, this is just chaos, right? And every spare firefighter that came in was looking for a job. These guys Calgary would steal 4, and Edmonton would get 3, and then Calgary would get 2, and Edmonton would get 5. And they're calling guys out of bed to try to win the day, right? And this is that firefighter spirit that, you know what, if we put a little competition to it, guess what we get? Excellence, right? And so in the morning, they called us up and said, yeah, we're all out of fencing. You got anything more? The EOC fires up a couple hours later, and guess what? There's no more fence to put up. So give us some more jobs, right? We need some more jobs. And so, you know, those are the 2 biggest fire departments in Alberta, and they're going head to head. and did 48 hours work in 12 hours, right? Just getting together, just getting it done. You know, I think of Fort McMurray, where, you know, we didn't know where to go. That's a big city, right? 90,000 people over there in that city. And so, you know, all these small fire departments are coming in. Nobody knows. It's one of those awesome cities where everything has a name, right? You can't go to 14th Street and 11th Avenue. It has to be like, go to Bobby's place and, you know, whatever. And so it was a really confusing city. So what did they do? Break up their team, put one Fort McMurray fire with each one of the crews, and now you've got homemade tour guide, right? So now you can, and so it's just like solving all these problems so fast, right? It just reminded me so much of being part of that awesome firefighting team and being able to take care of all of that stuff and be part of all of that stuff. All right, so we should probably switch gears before Sean falls asleep again. How much time do I have? How long am I supposed to talk?
I got a question for you along the way. The question is, so my brother was one of the aircraft pilots for Buffalo Airways CL-215s in Slave Lake. So he was brought in for that. With the exception of Wainfleet at the Wainfleet Bog and the Hagersville tire fire, we don't usually have aerial firefighting come into, you know, traditional, you know, suburban rural firefighting. What was it like to be involved in the planning and figuring out that, bringing in both helicopters? You talk about helicopters on the different communities when you were near Calgary in the water, or when you were in Slave Lake working with aircraft, when most of the time you're taught as a terrestrial firefighter.
Well, like here we're pretty used to it, so we call it aluminum overcast. Right, you look up and there's planes and helicopters and chaos. So I would say that for me it seems pretty normal. Lots of noise, lots of stuff, but a couple things I'll tell you about that, and both probably more interesting from Fort McMurray, and then we'll go back to Slave Lake. On the busiest days in Fort McMurray, there was more aircraft landing and takeoffs than Pearson International Airport. So when you talk about, like, you guys all know Toronto, you know how busy it is, right? It's an international airport. And so little Fort McMurray Airport, right? They're landing and taking off more aircraft than Pearson International Airport during this firefight. So it's big. It's every spare spot to park an aircraft, it's full. Every spare chunk of grass, right? So for the team that I was with, so we were Fort McMurray Urban. Every time I had to catch a helicopter ride, it was from the Ball Diamonds on Mac Island. So we kind of set up our own little helipad away from the chaos of the airport. It's dangerous. I think that every time, I hate helicopters. I've seen lots crash and got lots of hours in a helicopter and hate it, but it's a great way to see what's going on. But typically, you know, you get your airspace. And so, you know, I'm just structure firefighter flying around in a helicopter, and I want to say we're at 2,000 feet. That was our airspace. And so it's all stacked up and we're flying around at 2,000 feet. And you could see, you know, a bunch of guys over here fighting a rural fire where the bush had started to burn some stuff down. And then you fly over the city and there's 40 or 50 houses on fire. And then you get a call that, hey, you guys got to bump up to 3,000 because we're going to do a run here in Anzac. And so, again, for me, I think felt like it was pretty normal. It's always got that level of danger. But on the Fort McMurray fire, the level of aircraft was even surprising for me. I think that one day the most bombers was like 22 bombers or something like that. And then there had to be, I mean, we had 5 in our group. There had to be 60 or 70 helicopters working at the same time. But my favorite Fort McMurray story was we were getting a water outage. So we get a call right across from the main headquarters. It's probably day 5 or 6, I don't know. Blurs into one big meeting. And we get a call and this trailer's on fire. So I go over there right away. And I call the Southern commander and say, hey, you know what, we're going to need some extra trucks and get them rolling, right? But of course, it was an arson fire. So the power line was down blocking the road. The water was turned off for the area. Someone decided they're going to burn some trailers down, right? Of course, because we didn't have enough fire. And the first truck pulls in and it's like, hey, you guys remember there's no hydrant, right? Oh, yeah. Okay, well, we'll try and get it with our tank. So they pull over, try to get it. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, this helicopter comes over and he starts to bucket the fire, right? So like 160 gallons a drop, and he's pretty close. He's making trips about every, I'd say 90 to maybe 180 seconds, somewhere in that window. And he's dropping, and these guys are using their tank water. And then we get this call that says, I see an incendiary device, which I watch a lot of movies. So I'm like, what kind of Baghdad, Afghanistan thing is going on here today, right? And so I'm on the radio saying, like, what do you see? And it's like, it looks like dynamite all wrapped together. It's got a timer on it. And so usually someone like a firefighter says, oh, I see a device. I'm kind of like, man, you know, firefighters. And so, but to be that descriptive and that, like, this is what I see. So we pull everybody back except the helicopter, because he's not even working with us. He's just flying in, dumping his load, flying back. And so, of course, this goes from one trailer to a second trailer to a third trailer. And these helicopters are just flying in, dropping off, and their team starts to grow, right? And we're trying to figure out how to, we're urban ground forces trying to talk to these air guys, which typically would be easy, but not on a fire this big. And so I just got to sit there and watch all of this air show. Finally, ATCO got the line lifted up. A bunch of tenders came in. We got the water turned back on, and it turned into like a typical, 3-trailer firefight. And the guys got it knocked down, and we took care of everything. It was, just for the record, it was a road flare kit. So I'm not sure how they saw through a plastic box to road flares and a clock timer device, but that's the firefighter way. So that was a cool one. In Slave Lake, I would say a little bit different. There was a fire in 1998. I have a good video of, I should try to find. And we drove down the runway, and there was 58 helicopters parked on the runway, on the sides of the runway, and 18 bombers parked on the bomber pad, which typically holds 4. So we took a big video of that, and that always will stick out in my mind as a big fire, big campaign fire. But during the actual Slave Lake fire, I remember being on 12th Street, and so this guy named Ian Johnston, good friend of mine from Forestry, and I phoned him up. Be a little cursing here, so if you don't like that, plug your ears. But so I phoned him up and I said, hey, Ian, am I the only one that doesn't see any effing bombers here? And, like, houses are on fire everywhere. And he's like, Jamie, we can't. The wind's too strong. Like, if I put the bombers in the air, I'm going to kill somebody. I'm going to kill you guys. It could land on you. It could flip on you. And so that was like the first time in a firefight that I kind of ever remember someone telling us no. Like, we always get bombers. We always get helicopters. We always can have as many as we want to do whatever we want. And so, that was just another one of those weird things that happens, right? And then kind of, I guess that takes me to the aircraft incident where Jean-Luc Dubois died. So it's day 7, Slave Lake. Nice sunny day. We kind of had everything contained, I would say. We're putting out hot spots, and this big medium helicopter, well, we just get a call. Helicopter crashed in the lake. So I've been to lots of helicopter crashes and heard a lot of this stuff on the radio over the years, but this was the first one where, like, we have to make some immediate decisions, right? And so lots of resources out there. We put a bunch of close resources on the spot. I think they had them out of the cab of the helicopter within about 5 minutes was the timeline. We sent a bunch of guys from Slave. We were having lots of radio problems, right? 2011, we didn't have any digital radio trunk system or anything then. And I had said that morning to my 15-year-old son was working with one of the crews, and I'd said to Captain Turnbull, no matter what, you take care of my son and he doesn't see anything nasty, right? That was my rule. And so I drive all the way out there. I get there with the paramedics, and we get down to the lake, and there's my son standing there right in the middle of it all. And I'm like, what are you doing here, buddy? Like, seriously. And I think his mom has ESP or something, because my phone starts ringing immediately, and I'm like, oh, right? And it's like, put that one to voicemail. And then we're trying to figure it out. Phone again. Oh, that's Kirsten, right? My wife. Put that to voicemail. And we're trying to, so the pilot's in the ambulance headed to town. We got stars coming in to pick them up. We're trying to get the, all the rest of the chaos, right? What do we do with the fuel? What do we do with all of those things? And there's my son, right? So finally I have to answer the phone, and it's my wife, and she says, where's my son? So for any of you that are married, right? My wife has called him my son 150 times, probably, that I can remember. Every single time either him or I were about to get killed by her for doing something stupid. And so when she answers the phone and says, where's my son? I know that she knows that he's been on this really bad event, right? And this pilot's died. And so we bring him back to town, and I was working with Len McCharles, the old fire ninja, there that night. And he says, everybody got to go upstairs and do a debrief, right? So my son and my wife. And my son puts up a fight, but whatever, you can't fight with the ninja, right? So away he goes. And 5 minutes later, he comes back downstairs and he says, radio my crew, I got to get back out on that. And I was like, dude, you got to go up there, man. The fire ninja said you got to go up there. Your mom said you got to go up there. And he looks me right in the eyes and he says, mom's up there bawling her eyes out. I told him what I did. That guy left on my backboard. I did my job. Now you put me with my crew or I'm out of here. And I was like, damn. Yeah, I'll get your crew on the horn, buddy. Sounds good, right? I think that was the first time in my life where, one, I knew he could handle it, and two, I knew this kid's a fireman, right? We got him. That's how firefighters talk. We want to be in the action. We know what we did, and away we went. So I guess that's all my aircraft stories that I can think of right now.
Thank you. We've got a question from past President Frank. Frank, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Thanks, Chief. What did the incident command system look like for those large calls like that? Like when a town's burning down, how was your incident command set up?
I would say at first, you watch a lot of Westerns, kind of like getting a posse together.
All right.
There's one or two sheriffs, and we get a bunch of good guys with horses together and we ride out. I'd say later on, like day 3, day 4 in most of these, you follow ICS. So, you set it up, you got an incident commander, and we'd break it into branches and sectors, and each sector would have a boss. And so once you have enough time and you can actually properly plan out the ICS system, I would say that we followed that. In the heat of the battle, when it first starts up, I would say every truck was responsible for themselves to do a good job and account for their people. And in the first 12, 14 hours of most of these events that I've been to, that's what it's like. So it's kind of like a bunch of little mini posses running around doing their thing until we can get enough collected up to say, okay, now we're going to get command and control. Slave Lake was different. We had one radio channel for 1,100 firefighters and 100 fire apparatus. So you can imagine how that went, right? So I tell everybody, hey, position, condition, status, and needs. That's the only radio. But 1,000 firefighters all have some problem that they got to talk about on the radio. So we kind of switched to phones and sign language, a lot of, this sign language and those kinds of things. And really everybody just counting on their boss, on their truck to make a good decision. And you know what? The job is to find a fire and put it out. Find a fire and stop it from spreading. So, the first 12, 14 hours is like that. Then you try to transition to something that makes some sense. But I would say, if you're asking me if I learned anything, I would say that the lesson learned there is to set up an incident command post as soon as possible, to not use your EOC as an incident command post, and to have your people follow the training that they're supposed to do, right? And so I don't know how you guys are doing it out there. I hope a lot better than us. But for probably 10 years, all the EOCs thought that they were the boss of incidents. It was their job to run the incidents. And so they were, they're sending you orders from the EOC out to whoever to try and figure it out. Versus in 2019 at high level, we set up an incident command post right away. And so it worked way better, like right from the first minute. I'd say it worked better from there.
I've had a question
Thank you.
come through the chat. I guess it has to deal with a bit of ego and maybe turf or rank. It says that with all the information available and the world becomes smaller through seeing different people post their own trainings, how would you recommend a young firefighter provide an update of what he's learned or she's learned in training from learning online or seeing a skill and trying to present it to one of the officers or to yourself as a chief in your own experience?
Jeez, such a good question. Thanks for that. I'll flash back to my own. I took my 1001 training a long time ago, and I remember coming back and we learned some new hose rolls, right? Some new lays, and you're trying to present it, and it's like, shut up, kid, go stand in the corner, right? You don't know anything. I will tell you that for me, I think that showing what you learned rather than talking about what you learned would be the top way to do it. Try and find that champion in your fire department that's open to a new idea that, and I don't want to put age to this, because champions can be any age, can be men, can be women, can be whatever, right? So try to find those people that are open to the idea. And I will tell you that I'll tell you this story, because of course I have a story for everything, but the guys wanted to switch from a flat load that we'd been using for 100 years in Slave Lake to a AAA that they had learned and thought it would be better for our truck. And so I said to the guys, you know what, I'm open to it, but this is what we're going to do. Tomorrow morning, we're going to do our workout like we always do. And then everybody, we're already sweaty, so stay sweaty. And you're going to load one load our way that we do it right now. You're going to load one load your new way. And you're going to do that 10 times. And we're going to pull it off, right? And we're going to finish it. And then we're going to have a talk about who's right and who's wrong and what we're going to do. And so in my mind, I thought, this is an investment in time. We're not going to change. This has been working. It's all good. But I'm willing to invest the time to have a look at this process. Plus, I got to sit there and do nothing but drink ice cap for an hour. So it was good, right? And so they pull it off the first time, and the current way wins. And then they learn a few things about their load and change it for the second time. And by the time we finish 10 times, the new way has won 8 times out of 10, has kicked the old way's ass all over the place, up one end of the fire hall and back. And so I said, okay, good. Sounds good. Just leave it the way it is. Everybody shower up, get your uniform on, and we're going to meet in the war room, the meeting room. And so the guys come in and I said, okay, so, that was a good demo. Sounds good. And they're all ready for we're not going to change, right? Even though they know their way kicked ass. And so I said to them, here's the next challenge. So I'm good. We're going to change, right? So this is what I want. Before we can implement, I want a full implementation plan. How you're going to train all 5 of our fire halls, what that's going to look like. I want a video built of how to build this load step by step. I want a photo layout of how to build this step by step. And I want to know how each of the 5 halls is going to learn this and sign off on this and switch to this. And as soon as you have that, you win. If this is a competition, you win, and we're going to do this. Right? And so to me, on that particular day and that particular story, their actions spoke a lot louder than their words. Right? So they changed my mind by showing me a whole bunch of times how it can work and how we can change. So I would say that's how I would do it.
Not to cut you off, Jamie, you're doing an awesome job. I could sit here all night and listen to stories of fires, and it's just a different way of fighting fires, and it's interesting, I think, to everybody that's here. So, but thanks a lot for coming out tonight and spending an hour with us. And yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
On
really
behalf of Niagara District.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity, and yeah, check out the podcast. And I'm easy to get a hold of on social media. So if anyone wants to talk, at Chief Coots or just Jamie Coots on Facebook, and we can talk anytime.
Alrighty, thank you.
Right on. Have a good meeting, everybody. Talk soon.
See ya. Alrighty, so moving ahead, Don, can you read the minutes for us? Are you there, Don?
One second. Can you hear me?